So the people who ate fried fish had no difference in their amount of gray matter versus those who had baked fish or poached fish or fish cooked at a low temperature. So we want to, let's see, there's a couple strands here. We want to avoid oxidized fats. So that means things like cooking with vegetable oils. Cooking with vegetable oils is a terrible idea, even though we've been told that's what we should cook in for the past 2 or 3 decades. It turns out it's exactly wrong advice. We've been told to avoid fat and have a high carbohydrate diet. And again, it's just the reverse of what we need. What the original research that was against fat has been refined to show is that the real culprit is oxidized fats. It's the real culprit in heart disease. It's the real culprit in some brain disorders. It's the brain needs high quality fats. So things like cooking with coconut oil, cooking with butter or ghee, or cooking with lard or tallow, these are saturated fats. And it's fine to cook with those. Even olive oil, we don't want to cook with. Or if you do, very low temperatures. Olive oil is best eaten on salads, best eaten cold. So healthy fats would include things like avocados, nuts, grass-fed beef, pastured chicken, pastured eggs, pastured eggs, pastured cheeses and dairy and whole milk yogurt, fish, coconut oil. These sorts of things are great for the brain and great for our energy as well. Now, omega-3 fatty acids are particularly important here because, again, of the 2/3 of our brain that is fat, 1/3 of that is DHA. And the main place we get this is from fish. And you're right, most people don't eat enough fish or can't get enough fish to have an optimal amount of DHA. So getting a supplement is important. But there's 2 things to look for in a supplement. The first is a high DHA content. Many of the supplements out there have actually a pretty low DHA supplement. There's 3 types of omega-3, or 3 fatty acids in it. There's ALA, EPA, and DHA. And DHA is the one we want the most. The other thing we want in a fish oil supplement is we want it to be molecularly distilled. Otherwise, it's very likely we're going to get a big dose of mercury as well. And mercury is one of the most potent neurotoxins that they know of.
Okay, explain that terminology, molecularly
distilled. Right?
Yes,
So,
what does that exactly mean?
Yeah, mercury concentrates higher up the food chain in the fish community. So a lot of the fish oil that we see commercially has high levels of mercury with it. But if it's molecularly distilled, that takes out all the mercury and the pollutants. So what to look for, it's best to buy the stuff on the internet. I don't represent any particular company. I know Life Extension makes a particularly good one. I know Nordic Naturals makes a good one, both of which are molecularly distilled. There's a New Zealand company that does also. All of these have high DHA contents, and they are molecularly distilled. And most people could use about 2 to 4 or 5 grams a day for optimal functioning. They did this one experiment with monkeys where they raised monkeys on a low omega-3 diet, and they raised another group of monkeys on a high omega-3 diet. And then they looked at their brains afterwards. And the monkeys on the low omega-3 diet had very simple, undifferentiated brains. But those monkeys on the high omega-3 diet had very complex, very highly differentiated brains, almost like human beings. When it comes to the brain, complexity is good. We want complexity. And DHA and omega-3 fatty acids are one of the very best things we can do to build up our brain and also to increase our rate of neurogenesis. Let me stop there for a second.
Sure. Okay. So we've got, first of all, that's an extreme amount of information on the omega-3s, and I wasn't aware of the mercury as far as how they made that. So, and many of us, when we were younger, had mercury fillings. They used to put mercury fillings in our mouths. That's also a constant, because mercury doesn't go inert. It's always flowing. So, for those of you who have those fillings, it would behoove you to get them removed if you can and changed. That's the other thing. And I like what you were saying about the fats. I just learned about that myself, about the fats. Well, let me just say, when I was raised, that's what we had. Was we used butter and lard and those kind of things. We didn't use cooking oil. We just didn't have it to use. So it made a huge amount of difference the way I was raised compared to what I ended up with as far as the stuff that became available after I became an adult. And I have, in the past few years, have went back to not using any cooking oils whatsoever like that, except for the coconut oil and the butter and lard. And it's actually made quite a big difference in the taste of the food, too. It actually tastes better. So it reminds me of when I was a kid. So. All right. So, before we get, I don't want all the time to go away. Before we talked a lot about the diet, and I want to show people the book. I don't know. That's probably backwards, isn't it? The Neurogenesis, Diet and Lifestyle. This is the book. And it's big. It's filled with everything. We talked a lot about the diet, and anything else that you would like to add to that, please do. And then I'd like to kind of move into, when you kind of complete that, move into the lifestyle thing. Yeah.
Can I add one more thing about diet?
Oh, please, yes. Yes.
And that has to do with sugar. This high carbohydrate, low-fat diet that the government pushed for the past 20, 30 years has resulted, more and more nutrition science is showing this, has resulted in this obesity epidemic and this diabetes epidemic, and it's partially responsible for this Alzheimer's epidemic that's upon us. So it turns out that a high sugar diet will actually cut your rate of neurogenesis in two. It'll cut it in half.
Wow. That's
astonishing. When you think about the diet of the average American child who starts out the morning with, I don't know what, sugar frosted flakes and a glass of orange juice, it's like high sugar, high bad fat. This is terrible for people's brains. You can't build a good brain that way. No. Childhood rates of depression are 8 times what they were in the 1950s. And childhood rates of anxiety disorder are 5 to 8 times what they were in the 1950s. And that's using the same standardized tests that they used in the 1950s. That's not just better screening. That's the same tests. Why is this? Why is there this huge increase in emotional difficulties? Partly, it seems to me that the brains that are being built are not as robust, not as good. And the way to reverse that is by reducing our sugar levels, reducing the number of carbohydrates we take in, eating a lot of vegetables, cooked vegetables, fresh vegetables, and a lot of good, healthy fats. Just one other thing about the Alzheimer's and sugar-carbohydrate connection. So something like close to 80% of the American population is insulin resistant to some degree. What insulin resistance means is that there have been so much carbohydrates and sugar in our diet that the cells produce less insulin receptors. That means we need more insulin and that our blood sugar is at a higher level. That leads then to diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So, as you know, this is a huge problem right now. And it appears as if Alzheimer's is also involved in this. So some people are calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. That Alzheimer's also involves a disorder of the metabolism of glucose, right? Because all carbohydrates are eventually broken down into glucose, into sugar. So if you can lower your blood sugar levels, if you are pre-diabetic, or even if you're just insulin resistant, which most of us are at this point, given the average American diet. So a nice blood test for everybody to do when they get their yearly physical is called the hemoglobin A1C. And that tells you what your blood sugar has been over the last 3 months. And if it's at all elevated, then it would behoove you to take steps to lower your blood sugar. And if you don't, if you look at blood sugar levels and you look at cognitive decline, they track each other perfectly. So cognitive decline goes along with insulin resistance and higher blood sugar levels. One of the most important things we can do for our brain over the long run is to lower our blood sugar levels by eating a healthy diet like this. I know nobody wants to hear this. Sugar is addictive.
No, they don't. Everybody's going, no.
But it's like our brains are deteriorating so much faster than they need to because of this lifestyle. Okay, so that was the other piece I wanted to add.
Well, I'm glad you did.
And the book is filled with 30, 40 different nutrients that increase our rate of neurogenesis. Blueberries, for example, is another all-star. The brain just explodes with new neurons with blueberries. And there's 30 or 40 other things that it's helpful to take to increase the quality of our brain.
You know, I want to talk to you about blueberries. I think that it's an interesting thing that we brought that up today because just literally yesterday I was reading an article on blueberries. It's actually very, very difficult, at least it has been for me, to find organically non-GMO blueberries anywhere.
Mm.
And this particular article was about blueberries and the pesticides and what it does and what's in the pesticides that are found that they use to treat most commercially grown blueberries. And it was absolutely horrid. I mean, it was like, it literally read like a script from a horror show. It's like, oh my gosh. So in lieu of fresh or frozen, organically, non-pesticide, non-GMO grown blueberries, what would be something that people can do to, because blueberries are really, they're extremely filled with just tons of stuff. I mean, I did some research on it. So what's your answer to that?
Good question. So blueberries, if you eat them fresh, organic, that's great. However, there's also, although blueberries are kind of a low sugar fruit, they still do have sugar in them. So most of the studies that have been done have actually been done on blueberry extracts. What they give to mice or they give to animals, they give them blueberry extracts. And they find that these are just as effective for neurogenesis, as well as being antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, as fresh blueberries. However, when you eat fresh blueberries, you don't get the added benefit of enhanced glucose control. So when you take blueberry extract, meaning you eat like 4 or 5 capsules of dried blueberry extract, you also get the added benefit of enhanced glucose control. It enhances your glucose metabolism. So if you eat fresh blueberries, you don't have that benefit. So I actually would suggest that people do blueberry extracts if they have any blood sugar issues at all, because the overall effect is much better. And there are a number of blueberry extracts that are derived from wild blueberries. And so therefore they don't have any pesticides and they're not GMOs.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for that, because I was trying to figure out what people could do, because they really are very beneficial.
Yeah.
We've got like about 15 minutes, 15 minutes left, and I did want to let people know, if you have any questions, definitely get them into the chat box before we have to leave. What normally happens is people have the questions after, you know, we hang up. I wish I would have asked that question. So I'd like for you, maybe just for the next, you know, little bit here that we have left, is kind of pull all this together. We've talked an awful lot about diet and glucose and sugar and obviously the omega-3s and fats and all of that. Maybe you could give a little bit of an idea of what, I don't know, maybe a kind of a daily diet would look like, you know, just briefly, like a menu, so to speak, and then get into kind of the lifestyle and how you kind of wrapping all of this together. You started out by talking about the mind-body-spirit connection, but pulling more of it in together for the audience out here, because it's really important stuff, in my opinion.
Good. So, like for breakfast, you know, pastured eggs are one of the very best things you can do for your brain. You need a good amount of dietary cholesterol. And these days, even the government now says dietary cholesterol is not a factor in heart disease. It's oxidized cholesterol that was the problem, and still is the problem. So eating pastured eggs that aren't overcooked. If they're overcooked, then you oxidize the cholesterol. Or if you cook at high heat, you don't want that. So cooked at a low heat. Pastured cheeses, pastured whole milk yogurt, bacon from pastured pigs is great. Coconut oil is another thing to definitely to cook with and include. Again, depending on your sugar metabolism, you know, maybe a little bit of berries if you can do that, or if your glucose is under good control, and that's no problem. You know, and for lunch and dinner, we want things like salads and a lot of cooked vegetables. Probably cooked vegetables would make up the bulk of our food, but the bulk of our calories would be high-quality fats. So things from grass-fed beef, or pastured chicken, or fish, nuts. Again, avocados are fantastic foods. These kinds of things in a diet really enhance brain function. So that would just be like a sample.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Good, good.
But you're right. It is a lifestyle. Diet is an important piece of it, but there's so many other things. Like, for example, exercise. There's many types of exercise that are good for the body. Yoga is great. Strength training is great. But there's only one kind of exercise that actually increases our rate of neurogenesis, and that's aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise is any exercise that gets us breathing fast and hard. So running, fast walking, biking, fast dancing, swimming, walking up a mountain, anything that gets us breathing hard. The brain just explodes with new brain cells. If you can do this 3 times a week, or 5 times a week, even better. If you have a hard time walking, just walk a little bit faster. It doesn't take a lot. The brain produces chemicals that really enhance it, and it increases the production of a chemical called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that stimulates neurogenesis. Now, the brain again, explodes with new brain cells with aerobic exercise, but about half of those new brain cells die off pretty quickly. The brain prunes them. So we need to do a variety of exercise, of activities that increase the longevity of those things. One thing is exposure to new environments. So taking a walk in nature, travel, going to new parts of your city or town, exposing yourself to new things. One effect this has is it increases neurogenesis, but the other is that it keeps new brain cells alive. Again, it's this total package that works together. Some things increase new brain cell growth, other things keep those new brain cells alive. We need to do the whole thing together. So one other just dietary thing is hesperidin. Hesperidin keeps new brain cells alive. Hesperidin is a bioflavonoid found in citrus fruits. And you can also do it as a standalone supplement. And it's very helpful for keeping these new brain cells alive. So we can keep them just about 100% of the new brain cells that are formed. I think of spiritual practice as also being hugely important in this. You know, it's only recently that neuroscience has begun to research meditation and spiritual practice. And they were really surprised with what they found because they didn't really expect to see much, right? From the outside, when somebody's meditating or praying, it looks like they're not doing anything, like nothing's happening. But if you've ever meditated, you know a great deal is happening inside. It's actually a very dynamic state. And so when they started to do these brain imaging studies, they found out that the brain is hugely active in different meditative practices. So there are two forms of spiritual practice which have now been shown to be extremely helpful for brain health and appear to increase neurogenesis along the entire length of the hippocampus. So one form of spiritual practice is different mindfulness meditation practices. So there's many different kinds of mindfulness meditation practice. And what mindfulness does essentially is to bring us into the here and now, into the present moment. So one kind of mindfulness practice is paying attention to the sensations of the breath in your body. The sensations of the breath coming in, going out, pausing, and again, in and out. That brings us to an exquisitely attentive state to the sensations, the subtle sensations in our body. And that seems to be extremely effective. There's another form, there's many different forms. Another form is we don't pay attention just to the breath, but we pay attention to whatever is arising in consciousness. We observe it arising, we observe it passing away, we observe the next thing arising. All the different mindfulness practices bring us into this present moment. And that seems to have a profound effect on our rate of neurogenesis. The other type of spiritual practice that's been investigated are devotional practices. Things like devotional prayer, or compassion practices, or love, bhakti, surrender practices. Essentially, heart-opening practices. Whether they're in a Christian tradition, or a Buddhist tradition, or a Hindu tradition, or a Jewish tradition, or an Islamic tradition. It doesn't make any difference. These practices have a great deal in common, and they open the heart to an inner source of intrinsic love and light and joy. And this also seems to have a very robust effect on our rate of neurogenesis and is extremely helpful for brain health.
That's absolutely fabulous. I love the idea of the how you explain the meditation and I have to share with you that Time Magazine, on the cover of Time Magazine, I don't know, double-digit times, they did articles on meditation, was on their front cover.
That's great.
And it really is what got me to thinking about meditation when I was really young. And I had to learn how to meditate with the breath, by the way, the breath in, breathing in and out. And that's how I learned to listen to the quiet, the subtleness, because I was pretty boisterous. You know, my mind was always working and going, and I couldn't stop the chatter. And it was the meditation that helped me get into the connection of that subtle energetics and all of that. And once that happened, boy, things just really started to rock and roll. It was a really fabulous thing. And I really am a huge kind of you know, flag waver with the whole meditation thing. If you can do it, please definitely do, because it is so beneficial. And they have proven scientifically that if you meditate, that it actually brings a balance within the physiology. Just with those breaths in and out, that it pulls everything back into balance. All your levels and different areas that they have studied on it, it's just fabulous, the science and biology behind meditation. So it's a huge portion of all of this. Again, no portion of ourselves in our world is separate. It's all synergistic, just like you began this broadcast with.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it turns out you don't have to meditate for that long to actually have a measurable effect. They used to think that, okay, you have to do it for years before there's any measurable effect. Well, they've done brain imaging studies now with people who have meditated for 20 to 30 minutes in the morning and in the evening for 8 weeks. And after 8 weeks, there are measurable changes in the brain. There's measurable cortical thickening. So it doesn't take much. You begin, and you automatically begin to notice a difference pretty quickly. You notice a difference immediately in terms of your consciousness, and your brain then responds very rapidly.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, we're just about out of time, so I'll tell you what. I want everyone to know, of course, I have it posted on my website. It was in my newsletter. But if you will, for the listeners and the viewers out there, if you will give them your website, how they can get a hold of the book, and any other pieces of information that you'd like before we let you go today.
Okay, good. So the book is called The Neurogenesis Diet and Lifestyle, and you can get it through Amazon, or you can order it through any bookstore. It's also, if you want to read the first chapter for free, it's on the book website, which is neurogenesisdiet.com. It's one word. Or you can also check my website, which is brantcortright.com. BrantCortright.com. And there's a link to buying the book from the website also.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I tell you what, I have so enjoyed the portion of this that I did get to read, and I am it's gonna be kind of like my little Bible here. Like referring to it all the time. I can assure you on that, because it is really important that we connect ourselves, and it's just not that difficult to do. We can all make excuses. I'm too busy. I'm too this. But the 20 minutes. And I've always said to people, it's not really so much about the quantity, but the quality of time that you spend in meditation or doing things that are good for the soul and the spirit. The exercise is always good, and I'm very guilty of not doing that enough. So, maybe this will light a fire. I don't know. I'm hoping it does. But it's really nice to have had you on and have you explain in such succinct and eloquent way. I really appreciate your time today, and I know that the audience does too. And I hope they'll go and check it out and, adopt some of these things, if not all of them, for their own selves. So you've been a wealth of information here today, so I appreciate that. And before I let everyone go, please do check out the website, journeyswithrebecca.com. The links are there if you don't have a ability to write them down or listen to it all the way through. You can get it all on my website. Again, that's journeyswithrebecca.com. And while you're there, check out the classes that are scheduled, and check out the upcoming guests. I will be back on the air tomorrow evening from 7 to 9 p.m. So I did want to remind, and that's Central Time, I wanted to remind everyone of that. But at this time, I would like to tell Professor Cortright, thank you so much for being with us. This has just really been a pleasure and fun, and I hope that we can do this again sometime.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really loved your questions and the perspective you come from in all of this. And thank you also for just helping spread the word about neurogenesis.
You bet. I appreciate you. And to the rest of you, have a great rest of your day, morning, evening, whatever. And we will see you back here tomorrow. Thanks. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye, Dr. Cortright.
Bye-bye. So the people who ate fried fish had no difference in their amount of gray matter versus those who had baked fish or poached fish or fish cooked at a low temperature. So we want to, let's see, there's a couple strands here. We want to avoid oxidized fats. So that means things like cooking with vegetable oils. Cooking with vegetable oils is a terrible idea, even though we've been told that's what we should cook in for the past 2 or 3 decades. It turns out it's exactly wrong advice. We've been told to avoid fat and have a high carbohydrate diet. And again, it's just the reverse of what we need. What the original research that was against fat has been refined to show is that the real culprit is oxidized fats. It's the real culprit in heart disease. It's the real culprit in some brain disorders. It's the brain needs high quality fats. So things like cooking with coconut oil, cooking with butter or ghee, or cooking with lard or tallow is the one we want the most. The other thing we want in a fish oil supplement is we want it to be molecularly distilled. Otherwise, it's very likely we're going to get a big dose of mercury as well. And mercury is one of the most potent neurotoxins that they know of.
Okay, explain that terminology, molecularly
distilled. Right?
Yes,
So,
what does that exactly mean?
Yeah, mercury concentrates higher up the food chain in the fish community. So a lot of the fish oil that we see commercially has high levels of mercury with it. But if it's molecularly distilled, that takes out all the mercury and the pollutants. These are saturated fats, and it's fine to cook with those. Even olive oil, we don't want to cook with. Or if you do, very low temperatures. Olive oil is best eaten on salads, best eaten cold. So healthy fats would include things like avocados, nuts, grass-fed beef, pastured chicken, pastured eggs, pastured eggs, pastured cheeses and dairy and whole milk yogurt, fish, coconut oil. These sorts of things are great for the brain and great for our energy as well. Now, omega-3 fatty acids are particularly important here because, again, of the 2/3 of our brain that is fat, 1/3 of that is DHA. And the main place we get this is from fish. And you're right, most people don't eat enough fish or can't get enough fish to have an optimal amount of DHA. So getting a supplement is important. But there's two things to look for in a supplement. The first is a high DHA content. Many of the supplements out there have actually a pretty low DHA supplement. There's 3 types of omega-3, or 3 fatty acids in it. There's ALA, EPA, and DHA. And DHA